Some more people joining, I'm sure. Hi everyone, welcome to the Pearson Business Book Club. My name is Eloise Cook and I'm the publisher for the Professional Business List at Pearson. If you're new, each month at the book club we choose a Pearson business or personal development book and we invite the author to discuss it. They'll also give a masterclass on a key concept from the book. And don't forget that if you need to leave halfway through, the video should be available to watch on demand at the book club website. And I'll try and post that in the chat at some point. So what have we got on today? So our book this month is the Financial Times Guide to High Impact Negotiation by Professor Kasia Jagodzinska. Welcome Kasia. If you haven't got a copy yet, you can download a sample chapter of the book from the book club webpage. We also want you to use the Q&A function to ask questions and we'll get Kasia to answer these at the end. So Kasia, I'm going to introduce you now. I've got a lot to say about you. So Professor Kasia Jagodzinska empowers others to succeed by helping them boost their negotiation power. A professor, she works with students from universities in Switzerland, France, Italy and Poland. She also mentors and trains executives from some of the largest corporations in Europe, Asia, the United States and the Middle East, working with these business professionals from various industries and sectors to help them more effectively manage the professional and personal challenges they face when interacting with their business partners. She also served as senior advisor to the United Nations in Geneva, assisting in multi-stakeholder negotiations and conflict management. And Kasia is the founder of Negotiation Booster, an innovative approach to business negotiations that leverages the task-related aspects of a negotiation with the underlying emotional factors. So, crikey, what a profile. Welcome, Kasia. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much for the invitation and a warm welcome to all the participants, everyone from the audience as well.
Yes, thank you for joining us. So yeah, we have some questions that we ask at the beginning, just a few sort of to find out a bit more about you and the book. Can you tell me, why did you want to write this book?
Well, the book was quite a journey, actually. The main motivation for writing the book was threefold challenges that I noticed working with students, with executives, with business negotiators, with professionals from all over the world. And what I noticed is that we all share certain universal challenges. And so that was the main motivating factor. I will talk about the specific challenges in a moment. But the second thing was that I noticed that a lot of courses, a lot of training centers, a lot of coaches teach people how to apply tools and tactics and strategies. And that's great because we need to understand how the negotiation process looks like, which techniques can we use, which tactics, and so on. However, it's very often not enough. A toolkit seems a little bit not human enough for me. And I very often noticed as well that even though you can have a great toolkit, you can still have challenges related to the execution and implementation. And hence I thought it would be interesting to combine a novel approach, a three-dimensional approach, so the psychological factors combined with the transactional aspect of a negotiation and also the relational aspect between the parties that take part in a negotiation. And those were my main driving factors, I would say, in undertaking this project.
Yeah, that's fab. I mean, because it's people at the end of the day, and you have to allow for what might happen when certain groups of people get together, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, I have the feeling very often, and it's not just negotiation, but management, leadership, that we have taught people everything they need to know about theories, about strategies, and we are teaching, or we are in the desperate need for teaching them how, again, to be back humans. Even if we take any course, we see the acronyms business to business and B2C and so on. But where is the H to H, the human to human factor? Because after all, as you said, Eloise, it starts with self-management primarily. It starts with the person, and only then I believe we can manage successfully and efficiently and also enjoyably the external interaction with the negotiation partner.
So true, so true. And was there anything that surprised you about writing this book?
Well, I enjoyed the process with you. Definitely, I enjoyed it very much. What surprised me was I was always I saw myself as a racehorse in the writing sphere, in the sense that I have a goal, I have an objective, and just let's go for it. And I don't know if you recall, Eloise, but I sent you the first 5 chapters. I think I didn't want to work chunk by chunk because I'm very goal oriented. And big mistake at the beginning, I sent you the first chunk, 5 or 6 chapters, I don't even remember. And you had quite a lot of comments. So very, very good comments, by the way. And then I realized, you know, it's much better to actually go step by step, phase by phase. And that's in terms of writing the book. But I would say that could also, because our listeners, after all, are here not just to listen to the writing process, but also perhaps get some insights on negotiation. I would say that also in a negotiation, have the major goal in mind, and I'll be talking about that in a moment, but also think about structuring the process step by step with the global goal in mind, but also let it free flow and control the things that you can control basically step by step. I think we very often focus on the huge objective, huge goal. And for some people, this can be a little bit difficult to manage. They prefer, for example, not to negotiate, or they label the negotiation as too difficult for themselves. And that mindset will then drive the process and will drive their negotiation power in the end, impact it negatively.
Yeah, mindset is so important in all spheres of life. So I completely appreciate that.
I believe so. Yes, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So I make this statement at the beginning that the most important negotiator that you have to convince is first and foremost yourself. Very often, if I've experienced this, on myself, on working with my clients as well, that if they lack a certain belief that they can actually win the negotiation, whatever winning means, we can talk about what does it really mean, success and to win, and so on. But whatever that means, that can be very, very personal. Of course, it can be profit driven, it can be a target, it can be a specific number, but it's very personal. Triumph and winning and success is defined by each of us. For one person, that may be maintaining or building a relationship. For the others, it may be the monetary gain. For another person, it may be overcoming some psychological barriers that they have, or some inner challenges that they're facing. So it's very personal. I also don't think that we should throw everything in this corporate language type of success, efficiency, effectiveness, because like Eloise, you said, after all, it's a human to human interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, how do you want readers to feel about reading your book?
So the readers, I'm thinking already about leadership. They start with, the book starts actually with the mindset. So what to do, and I did that deliberately. I deliberately started the book with challenges, the challenges that I've mentioned, that are either related to confidence, emotions management, and strategic challenges, because I wanted deliberately a reversed logic a little bit. Most books, they start with success stories. They start with success formulas. I'm not sure I'm convinced by that approach. I much rather like it to be genuine, and I like to show off the mistakes that have been made. Therefore, I start with the challenges with this reverse logic in mind, so that each reader can find a piece of themselves in those challenges, so that they can feel, wow, you know, I'm not the only one facing certain barriers or certain dilemmas in a negotiation, that it's universal. Basically, it's universal. I am in the privileged situation, very much so, that in an executive setting, on one hand, when I engage in international business negotiations, the setting is more, I would say, externalized, it's more strategic, it's more tactical. But on the other hand, I'm in the privileged position of being a coach as well and a trainer. And in that setting, and of course the professor as well, so students confide in me very often, but business professionals very often in the training sphere take the masks off. And I'm from that privileged position that I very often hear, and it had happened that I've heard both parties out that negotiate, both sides that negotiate with each other, they say exactly the same things. They mirror each other's dilemmas, challenges, and so on, obstacles that they see to the negotiation process. And I think that that privileged position or that insider knowledge gave me that strength or empowerment to be the voice for people who not always have the opportunity to listen to the other side, so that they can see that, well, basically you're not alone.
Yeah, and understanding that, yeah, we're all fallible, we all make most mistakes. It's so affirming and authentic, you know.
That's why the first thing, and a huge part of that, and you recall we were wondering how to tackle this, how to tackle the structure. We spent considerable time on the table of contents itself. And in the end, we decided together that first the mindset, and then we talk about the process, only then the strategic design. And I think that works quite well. And at some point during the COVID pandemic, because this is my third book, so I already had the warm up with the previous two ones, I made the decision, I finally, due to less travel, due to less external commitments, I finally had the opportunity to pursue, I would say, my lifelong dream, which was analytical psychology. And I started studying that. Also from the perspective, I felt that in leadership, in management, in negotiation, I'm quite already, I would say, quite skilled, or I have possessed the fundamentals of the knowledge that we need, but I felt there was an element that was lacking for me to understand how I can assist myself, my readers, also my clients and so on, to understand some of the factors that drive their behavior, first internally and then externally. So I started studying that and adding to the book. So you might notice that a lot of words of appreciation have been said about the book in relation to the psychological aspects of it, because that is a novel element. That is something that you either take a psychology book or you either take a strategic book to negotiations. But I find that the combination of those two works quite well, or one boosts the other in a way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Great. Well, I will hand over to you for the masterclass. And if anyone has any questions for Kasia at the end, just pop them into the Q&A as and when. And yeah, we'll can't wait to hear what you've got to say.
Thank you very much. So let's do like this. As we were deciding also together, we wanted to make this talk very hopefully very interesting for the audience, first of all. So I deliberately have not prepared any slides. Again, staying true a little bit to what I said before, that I would like to avoid the classic, this is that, it's not a lecture. I would like to have more of a free talk. So Eloise, if you have any questions or if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to contribute. I will talk for a few minutes. And then what I would like to do is I would like to have a talk with the audience, with you, to address your particular questions, what interests you. At the end of the day, it's your opportunity also to learn let's learn from each other, also from the questions that the audience will ask. So feel free, you have the chat option. We have quite a big audience, I would say, so I'm sure we can have an interesting discussion. And meanwhile, while you think about some of the questions perhaps that are on your mind in relation to high impact negotiation, perhaps let's start with, we talked a little bit about my motivation for writing the book. Let's start with the title itself, maybe the high impact. I have it in front of me here, so that's why I'm looking down. High impact negotiation, a comprehensive guide for executing valuable deals and partnerships. And this is something that, of course, we were also working with Eloise. We had certain proposals, I would say several even proposals for the best title. And hence we've decided that we want to add the valuable elements to the deal, to the title, to the deals. It is so that it points towards the fact that a negotiation, what we mentioned a little bit before, what is a success? What does success mean? What is a successful negotiation? And that element of being valuable. The beauty of value is in the fact that value is in the eye of the person who is assessing the value. It's like beauty. For one person, what is beautiful for one person may not necessarily be such for another. And here, why this element of value in the title? So first of all, what I notice very often, more and more actually, as the economic situation becomes strained, as we are operating in a more and more volatile environment, I hear two things very often. First is price, so a singular focus on the transactional value. And second is fear that we fear price increases, inflation, shortages of supply, but the prevailing theme now is emotion driven. And that very often, that emotion, that negative emotion of fear, of course, fear can be also a stimulating factor like stress, but that governs our approach. And it's pretty much in consequence, or it's pretty much logical that the focus will be a singular focus. This is dangerous. And this is a situation that does not necessarily expand or create value in negotiations. Hence, the book also addresses, and I thought this is a very important element, what is value, how to create value. Value, as I mentioned, can be psychological for the person, for the negotiator. Of course, value can be related to the financial aspects. I'm not claiming that a negotiation is philanthropy. Very often, obviously, we negotiate because we need to decide and agree on the distribution of limited resources, but also value in terms of relationships between people. And I found that combination is quite interesting and quite important. The next thing that I think we should mention, or I should mention rather, is the structure of the process itself. So you might be surprised that the first element that I actually talk about in relation to the process design itself is the mission. And here I would like to quote Nietzsche, the philosopher, the German philosopher Nietzsche, who said that whoever has a why to live can bear almost any how. Whoever has a why can bear almost any how. Very often, let's stop here for a moment. Very often I hear my business clients saying that this is a life or death negotiation. With all due respect, there is no such thing in business as a life and death negotiation. It may, unless you're negotiating a crisis situation, a hostage taking, life attempt taking situation, business is seldom life or death situations. In extreme cases, it may feel as such. And why did I choose? It's a little bit heavy. I do realize that it's a little bit heavy, this quote, that whoever has a why to live can bear almost any how, because I want to talk about purpose. And going back to the mission statement, that this is what I start the discussion on the design of the process. In contrast to many books who start with the design of the process, opening the negotiation, then which tactics to apply and so on, which is great. On one hand, this is very, very important that you understand how to design the process properly. But more important, before you actually jump in the execution and in the design and the preparation of the whole negotiation, I believe we need to ask ourselves the question, why? What is the purpose of what you engage in, of what we engage in? I've often asked my clients, why are you negotiating? Oh, isn't it obvious? I want a better price. I want better conditions. I want this and that. That only goes so far. That goes to the transactional value. But why? What are you driven? What is your purpose? If you have a purpose, you will find a way to get there. So please notice it's quite logical in the corporate setting. If you go on any website of any company, you will see that they start with a mission statement. With a mission statement and supporting values. And this is something that I would like to also encourage the listeners and my readers to do, to start with defining how you want to conduct the negotiation, how will we get to where we want to be, and by which values. And this brings us back to the title as well, executing valuable deals. Value can be, as I mentioned, transactional, it can be psychological, it can be relational, but also what are the values? This is another way of looking at it. What are the values that I want to bring in the negotiation? And at one point in the book, I talk about the negotiator's 10 commandments. I will not enlist all of those commandments now. I've gathered them from interviews with executives, with business professionals, with students from all across the world, and they're pretty universal. So these they could pertain to negotiation, but also it could relate to being a genuine person in general, an ethical person, doing no harm to others, being likable as well as a negotiator. Likability, which is the common, which is this very often agent Gary Nestor very often talks about likability, which I find is a great way of looking at this human face of negotiation as well. So start with a mission, start with who do you want to be? How do you want to be perceived? Think of a negotiation as the engine for your personal achievements, what you want to obtain, but also obviously on the corporate level or the organizational level, a negotiation. I always see it as an engine for fulfillment of organizational goals. And going back to the values, very often I'm asked, which is a bit for me disturbing. Very often I'm asked, can we equate negotiation with manipulation? I believe we shouldn't, not just for ethical reasons, but also, and not only because of courtesy, because of respect to our negotiation partners, but primarily also out of respect for ourselves. Out of respect, because what we do on a regular, you can't say, okay, I will manipulate in a negotiation, but I will not manipulate elsewhere. Very often what you do, you become, it becomes a habit. And this is yet another thing that, Eloise, you asked me why the need for this book. Very often I see negotiators engaging into or jumping into negotiation process with a mosaic of habits. We all have them. We all have our particular way of doing things, negotiating as well, that are flavored by our cultures, upbringing, education, training, and so on. And imagine this landscape, this mosaic of people who have an idea of how the negotiation process should look like, and then those energies collide, they meet and they collide very often. So my hope also is that we structure, that I assist my readers in structuring the process, in applying a universal approach and understanding of the phases of the negotiation, because in the process part, we are talking about the mission. We are talking about also, so how will we win? The mission is how will we win? What is our goal, which is very broad, which is what I mentioned before, the eye on the prize, and then objective, what are you negotiating for? And which values and which behaviors would you like to apply in order to get you there? Without further ado, with this very short intro, now that you know a little bit what the book is about, let me also perhaps add that it's the value. If we're talking about value, for me, the huge value is also the part where experts contribute. To each chapter, an expert contributes. So we have experts from the FBI, we have experts from the NYPD, we have experts also from the art and science of persuasion and influence. We have industry experts who I believe enrich the book enormously. My insights are one thing, but also to see how those, how my opinions, how my views, how my understanding to certain negotiation concepts resonate with professionals is something that I personally found an enormous added value and very, very enlightening in the process as well. And also to show the readers a different angle, different ways of looking at things, a different type of vocabulary as well. So those are extracts that you will find in each chapter that enrich the book, that are on the topic, that show a different angle. The book also has a lot of exercises for self-empowerment, for self-improvement, some of the tactics that you can use, some of the psychological exercises as well for winning, for boosting your own negotiation power that I've experienced or experimented with my clients, with my students as well, and a lot of small exercises to allow you to become better negotiators and become more confident, better, successful, as we said, whatever that success may mean as well for each individual person. And I suggest that we have approximately spent 20 minutes me talking. How about we answer if there are some questions, so that it's not just me talking. Of course, I'll be talking and adding, but maybe let's also allow a voice to our audience. Eloise, what do you think about that?
Sure. We've got some questions coming in already. So first one, I read a quote about best practices of negotiation that says that the best kind of negotiation is when both sides win. How much do you agree with that? And how much in a negotiation should you think about how much the other side would benefit, or only focus on your position?
Okay, that's in the spirit of the win-win model. I see that someone has been influenced by the win-win. I think this is a question from Anna, if I'm not mistaken. So Anna, in relation, I believe that both parties should leave the table feeling that they have won. And why is that? First of all, it's not just, again, not just ethics, not just courtesy, but more importantly, if you think about the negotiation process, all the phases or the life cycle of the negotiation process, a lot of people confuse two things: deal makers with real makers. A deal maker leads the process from the preparation, from the opening to the closing of the negotiation. They find an agreement, they sign the agreement, and for a lot of people, for a deal maker, the deal is done. For a real maker, on the other hand, they also ensure that the process is executed, but also that the terms of the negotiated agreement are actually implemented in practice. And back to the question then, this is strategic. So this is the strategic design and the difference between a deal maker and a real maker on the strategic level. But on the psychological level, the question that a lot of, or the dilemma that a lot of practitioners face is, how do I actually make sure after the deal is done that the other party will respect the terms of the agreement so that they will become implementable? If both feel that they have won, then the likelihood of the deal actually being implemented and executed increases dramatically. If one party leaves the table and feels like in a competitive, that's why I like the win-win, but we'll talk about the condition for a win-win is that both negotiation partners are in a win-win mindset. So if one is cooperative, collaborative, and the other is very competitive, is going to be very, very difficult to achieve a win-win. So that win-win is primarily there to tick off the transactional for both parties, but also make sure that in a competitive, so in a win-lose strategy, inevitably, as the name itself suggests in competition, which is a win-lose strategy, there will be a loser, someone who lost the negotiation or feels that they lost. Very often this is related to the loss of face, to the loss of credibility, to the ego being a little bit bruised and offended. And that is not a partner for the long term who will be motivated to implement and execute the terms of that agreement. So Anna, I believe that that's why the win-win is important.
Right.
I can take a sip of tea, Eloise, while you read the next one.
Yeah, have a drink and I'll answer the next question. So how do you negotiate when you have no leverage? That sounds like a tough one.
You make leverage. So as I mentioned earlier, and I know that may be a harsh answer, but it's meant to sound harsh, exactly, because as I mentioned before, speaking from practice, if you do not have leverage, what will happen is that you will enter the negotiation feeling like you have a knife on your throat situation. I've done this many times, multiple times, and I've never, ever won a negotiation where I went in with no leverage. Creating leverage is actually a big part of the preparation process. What does that mean? Leverage, it's a term, an umbrella term for two things, actually. For creating alternatives outside of the negotiation, crafting alternatives for yourself that will enhance or boost your negotiation power, your belief that you actually have an alternative track. Let me give an example of an alternative. Just a few weeks ago, I was coaching a female executive, very high level, excellent professional, capable, fully capable, great performance, great track record, and so on, suffering from, in what her opinion was, lack of leverage. Strategically, she had it all. Psychologically, she was doubting. She saw herself as not having any leverage. So she was preparing, we were preparing for a very important negotiation for her, a bonus, a salary increase. She had certain needs that financial primarily that needed to be met. And in order to create that leverage for her, we actually, before the negotiation that she had planned, a few weeks before she started applying for different positions to check, to create her leverage, because we were sure she would get, this would resonate with headhunters out there. As I said, it was a high profile professional, but she needed to see that her CV is desirable, that she has leverage, that she can enter the negotiation and feel like, there are alternative options. That's outside. What I'm mentioning, that is external leverage. Internal leverage can be created with your negotiation partner in the form of options. So if we cannot, and this is perhaps going back to Anna's question from before, if we cannot reach a win-win also, what can we make concessions on? What types of options can we bring to the table? And so on. But I believe that leverage is actually one of the most important aspects. And please notice that in a negotiation, for an effective negotiation process, both partners have to be on the same level, which means level, leverage, and so on, that you have to step up. You have to step your game up to the level of your negotiation partner. So you have to be on eye level. A small maybe tactic that I stopped personally, what I stopped doing, I stopped thanking people for their time. If you thank people for their time, you subconsciously place yourself in a position where you have less leverage, because you indicate, in a way, your time is more precious than my time. This is what you start to believe. I'm not encouraging, this is not a book talk on how to be an arrogant negotiator. And I'm not encouraging you not to think, but you can think for different things. You can think for an opportunity. You can think for an insightful conversation. You can think for a meeting. You can think for a different view on or different perspectives, but not necessarily for someone's time, because your time is equally valuable, and the effort and the energy that you bring to the negotiation arena.
Love it. Yeah, if you act like you have no leverage, it's sort of all self-enforcing, isn't it?
Yes, act, but that acting does not happen in a vacuum. That acting, that externalized manifestation, is a reflection of the internal processes of what you say to yourself. I have no other choice. This is the most important negotiation of my life. If I lose this, listen to the words already. If I lose this, then something. This is a very negative framing, and it's very extremely dangerous and extremely limiting, because also what we don't talk about enough is the aftermath effect of a negotiation. Success and failure will create what is called in psychology a perceptual set. A perceptual set means that in future similar circumstances, you will behave in a similar fashion to a past experience, to a past situation. So let's say if you had bad experiences working for a law firm, as I had, for example, my first job, I don't feel comfortable anymore in law firms, even though I'm a child that has been raised by a lawyer mother. I spent a lot of time in law firms. I felt like a fish in water at law firms until I had a very, very bad experience with my first job working at a law firm that allowed me, unfortunately, it's not the best choice of word, but that created that perceptual set. So in that setup, subconsciously or unconsciously rather, I have this set of emotions or experiences or flashbacks, whatever we want to call it, that makes me not fully comfortable, and which in that setting would minimize my negotiation power as well. So any success or any failure ultimately starts in the mind. It starts internally, what you say to yourself. And that's why very often I recommend that if one is in a negative situation, it's best to cut it as quickly as possible in order to not develop that perceptual set, to not label oneself as, I always lose in negotiations, or I never have enough power, or no one listens to me, or they will never accept my offer. This is a very dangerous mindset.
Yes. I think this one's more of a comment. You are so correct about a clear mission statement. If you know what you stand for and what you hope to achieve, it will help direct your negotiation efforts to ensure the steps you are taking do indeed work to further your goals and reinforce your organizational values.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment.
Another one, I like the idea that values are so important to negotiation. Do you want to talk a bit more about that, Kasia?
About which one?
That values are important to negotiation.
Yes, so maybe I can share, actually, I'm going to reference a little bit the types of values that I've grasped in itself. Just give me a second to go through my own book, actually. The 10 Commandments, maybe, because those reflect the values that I believe that would be worthwhile. Now, maybe first of all, how did I come up with those values? As I said, in the course of writing the book, I've spoken to a lot of experts from the win-win tradition, so the principled approach to negotiations, the FBI model to negotiations, so FBI negotiators, crisis negotiators, also business executives, colleagues at the UN, students, executive students that have shared. And in the course of those interviews, which went into thousands, I found, how to say this, resonating words or resonating mindsets, or a common thread rather, of the value system that would be worthwhile to think about when we engage in negotiations. So the first one is very concise and it's very strategic, as the first commandment is to be clear about your intentions. So this clearly brings us to there's two things. First of all, what do you want? Why do you negotiate? So let's take the example of a job negotiation. Very often I hear from my clients, I want to get a job. This is not a clear objective in a negotiation. A clear objective answers the question, what do you want the job for? Do you want the job to have a higher salary? Do you want to get the job because you want to advance your career? So career development is your main goal. Do you want to get the job because you've reevaluated your work and life values, and maybe after COVID, a lot of people have questioned how they want to live according to which model and so on. Maybe you've reevaluated and you want a job that fits more into that mindset or in that worldview that you have at the moment. But be clear about your own intentions and be clear about the intentions externally to your negotiation partner. Now, I'm not claiming a negotiation is a confession, that someone says, asks you questions about your bottom line, your walk-away position, and so on, and you have to disclose all your cards. I'm just talking about being transparent, fairly transparent, and clear on what you want to achieve. So that would be the first value. Second, and first and foremost, I would say be respectful. And this is something that I learned from Gary Nessner, actually, that even people who have committed acts that would be criminal, that are assessed as, not would be, but are criminal, that even those people whom we can condemn by the letter of the law or by our ethical system, they merit respect. And this is, I think, very humble. And this is also something very often that we are missing in difficult negotiations, where people become driven by their emotions, very often by fear. Fear has an ugly face, and being driven by emotions, very often people can become arrogant, people can become aggressive, which for me is usually a sign of weakness. I've never perceived an arrogant or aggressive negotiation partner as someone who is strong, quite the contrary, actually. Third value, have an open mind. I think this is something that is critical. Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychologist, said that perception is the only reality. We have approximately 79 people here in the session. Each of you will have a different perception. Each of you will pay attention to a different element, will pay attention to different things, and so on. And that is reality for us. Reality is how we perceive it. So we have to have an open mind to understand what certain perspectives or perceptions may be. Four, be flexible and open to negotiate. Never burn bridges. And I would say here, back to Anna's comment, that comment that particularly stayed in my mind because I read it, and if I read something, that it becomes ingrained in my mind, so that's why I'm referencing all the time. The win-win, that openness to negotiate. Win-win leaves the door open to future negotiations if possible, even if we cannot, let's say, manage to find an agreement at this moment in time. We keep an open mind and flexibility to future possibilities. In other words, we don't burn bridges, and so on. 5, be accountable. People who are trained in negotiation, people who have any level of expertise, are experts, or have the privilege of being trained or skilled, hold a responsibility, in my opinion, for their behaviors, how they carry themselves, what are some of the values that they introduce in conversing and discussing and negotiating with each other, in creating and acting as role models, quite simply. I think that is something that if we have enough good role models, and I have quite a few role models, personally, I always think in a negotiation when I feel that either I feel I don't have leverage, which makes me emotional, which makes me irrational, I think about my role models. I think about how do the people whom I aspire to be, how would those people behave in that situation? What would they do? How would they carry themselves? And that allows me to negotiate from a place of elegance, with dignity, with respect for the other person as well. And then what I mentioned before, this is something that I've picked up from, again, Gary Nessner, likability. Something that personally I've not thought about as a negotiator. I remember when I was a very young negotiator, just starting my career path, I thought that the mark of a professional negotiator is task orientation. That the more task oriented we are, the more professional we are. I would not have thought about the likability factor, that this is actually something that matters as well. And hence I mentioned before the transactional and the relational aspect. And then be communicative, which means open, whatever communication, whatever this umbrella or this phrase, effective communication means. Primarily, in my opinion, it means understanding each other, and understanding requires listening. First and foremost, to the other person, understanding what drives them and communicating in a language that they will resonate with. Let me give you an example of being communicative and understanding the other person. People fall in one of three categories. So you can have either visual people, as you might have noticed, I'm visual. I read Anna's comment and it's ingrained in my mind, classic visual person. So people who see, they will use phrases such as, I see, this looks good, and so on. That's how they describe reality. Then you have auditory people. People that need to hear something, they will say, I hear you. This doesn't sound right, and so on. It sounds weird to me, or I can't hear this. It doesn't resonate with me. Auditory people. And then you have kinesthetic people. Kinesthetic people feel. They will say, this feels off. It feels something is not right to the touch, and so on. And now imagine that you have two negotiation partners, very often, or let's do a simpler example, a salesperson who wants to sell a car. The client comes in and walks around the car and touches the leather, touches the steering wheel, touches the shape of the car, the metal, and so on. And the salesperson approaches and says, listen to the engine roar, listen to how the engine works. They are talking on two different planets. One is auditory and the other one is kinesthetic. So that's what being communicative also means, to understand what is the paradigm, what is the type of the other person, what communication style will resonate with them. Then act with integrity, which means walk the talk, walk for your own credibility, to be perceived as a legitimate negotiation partner. Again, for whom? For yourself, primarily, for yourself, and obviously the other party will also benefit from that. Know your boundaries and never compromise on your values. I think that's a question of what are you willing to compromise in a negotiation, and that's also a question of accountability, of integrity, of respect, primarily for yourself and also for your negotiation partner. How far are we willing to go in the negotiation? One might think of Machiavelli and the expression that the end justifies the means. We some food for thought that you can also use. And then 10, very simple, do no harm. Do no harm. I personally, that's why I chose out of the legal profession, because very often there were personal and ethical choices that one had to make, which left me uncomfortable. And I felt this does not fit personally my value system. So do no harm, I would say, is the last value. Quite a lengthy answer to a short question.
That's fab. I think there's sort of 10 commandments for business generally, never mind just negotiation. Here's another question. If you're negotiating across two different geographical or cultural teams, is there anything that you would suggest is key to creating a successful negotiation?
Yes, first of all, understanding the cultural differences. And I can recommend a few resources. The way that I prepare myself, and this is based on a lot of mistakes made in the international arena, failing to understand the context. I think that a few references are quite helpful. There's also there's of course the Hofstede's cultural dimensions, Hofstede's. That you can Google. It's very easy as a reference tool. You can compare cultures. Some criticize, say it's outdated, it's 1970s theory and research. I use it as one of the benchmarks. I never use one theory or one reference point when I prepare for these types of negotiations. You, of course, can reference as well Edward Hall, High and Low Context Cultures. There's a fantastic book by Aaron Mayer, The Culture Map, which talks about relativism between cultures. Very simple Google tool is Culture Guides or Global Edge Culture Crossing, where you can actually type in any country, any culture as well that you want to check out and you want to research. And in that package, and then I also like to speak about someone who is a representative of that culture as well. In that spirit, I prepare myself for negotiations. And once again, what I mentioned at the start is if you do not understand the differences, the intercultural differences, in the end, you will hurt yourself in the negotiation, because you will perceive, for example, we mentioned never thank someone for their time. There are cultures where being on time or having someone wait for you is a tactic. So it's already a tactic to show you your time is less valuable than my time. You wait for me, therefore you are in a lower position. And imagine someone from that culture negotiating with someone from a culture where time flows freely. So not necessarily do you have to be on time. That not being on time is definitely not a tactic. It's just the way that time is approached and is perceived. That person, looking through their paradigm, will consider that they are being disrespected, that their time is not treated as valuable time. So you need to understand, first of all, for yourself. And as I said, accountability, be accountable as one of the values. I would say that I always hold myself accountable to being the one who should know better, or at least trying to know. And I don't mean know better in the sense of being better, but understanding and taking responsibility for the design of the process as well.
Fantastic. And very interested to hear what you've got to say about this question. Do you see any special challenges that a female negotiator might face when engaging with a dominant type A male personality?
Where is this question?
It's from Gary.
Hold on. I do not see it, because when I see it, I can answer it better. It's in the questions, or?
Yes. So do you see any special challenges that a female negotiator might face when engaging with a dominant type A male personality?
A female can also have a dominant personality, and a male can have a submissive personality. That's a tricky question, a little bit tricky here. I would say my answer to that is to be genuine, to be yourself. So the worst thing that one can do is to be over dominant. So I have a dominant person, so I will over dominate them. What do you think will happen? The dominant will try to over dominate, and you'll have this effect of a snowball. Who is going to be more powerful, and so on. In my experience, power, dominance always creates defense. So if you inflict pressure, try to dominate the other person, the reaction will be the counter reaction. Be genuine, I would say, because if you try to over dominate, which is not necessarily your style, the other person will feel you are not feeling comfortable in your shoes as well. Then, of course, there is the finite question. Do you accept such behavior? Remember, we said that there are certain things that you are willing to compromise, and that there are certain non-negotiables. I think that being true to what we said about respect as well, mutual respect, that works, as the name suggests, mutual both ways. You can accept certain standards of behavior, and you can clearly communicate what you accept and what you do not accept as well. So in the end, that's a choice. How are you going to handle? Is this a business relationship also that will be fitting, and that will be a long-term business relationship? Because even if the dominant person takes over the discussion, the question that I'm thinking is it going to be a real making situation or just a deal making situation? But my biggest advice as a female, not to make this a feminist manifesto, because it's not, but I'm very often asked this question as a female, having experience from men and from women the same way as we all have experienced bad and good things. Be genuine and be true to yourself as one. So I don't think that one should pretend to be someone that they're not, quite simply.
Fantastic. I'm conscious of time, so we might have to do more of a quick fire approach now. So we've got a few questions left, so let's see if we can get through them. I would like to know what your KPIs are, so your key performance indicators, because in this world we have talkers and doers. I guess George is asking, is is there a sort of difference between whether you're a talker and a doer, and how you sort of measure your performance?
Obviously, the simplest measure is what I talked about before, to measure the cost versus benefits of a negotiation. And this is one of the key KPIs that you need to assess. If we think about the fact that a negotiation is like an engine for organizational goals. So the KPI would be related directly to the organizational goal. What do you want to achieve? Is it a transactional value? Is it a relational aspect? So for example, we might make a concession on the transactional value, monetary value, because we are gaining an important business partner, or we are gaining a market share, or we are gaining potential exposure possibilities, and so on. So that will be linked directly to the organizational goals. If you have financial, obviously, it's very easy to say, we've reached it. Our objective is to increase by X% in this and this time period. So you can measure that as a KPI, but also customer feedback. If it's a service provider, customer feedback can be a KPI. So the rate of positive feedback that a company receives or a team receives can be considered as one of the KPIs. So it depends. I would say that the KPIs are driven by the goal that you want to have achieved. For someone, it may be psychological. Maybe someone who has a mindset that they don't want to engage in negotiations at all will set for themselves a small KPI that they will engage in 2 minor negotiations per month, maybe. And for them, if that person successfully manages to engage in that discussion, they have reached their KPIs.
Fantastic. And aside from believing that you have no leverage, are there any other limiting beliefs that can impact effective negotiations?
Yes, as I've mentioned before, these confidence related, believing that you have no leverage, believing that you are not a worthy negotiation partner. Very often this is something that I hear. Emotions related challenges as well. So believing, for example, that empathy is the mark of a weak negotiator, that kindness is equivalent to weakness as well, that no one will ever pay attention to you, for example, that you don't have a voice in a negotiation. Those are some of the other. More in the spirit, I would say, leverage is more strategic, because leverage has to be created. We talked about the mindset danger of not having leverage, but I would say that leverage is more strategic. The other are more psychological, so emotions related, emotions management related, or confidence related, and that is very, very broad in itself. And there's a lot of tools in the book that will allow you also. It's very difficult for me to summarize in 1 minute or 2 minutes. There are multiple exercises that will allow you step by step as a guide to manage some of those psychological challenges, also from that perspective, from the psychological aspect.
Yes, the book is full of checklists and templates, so you can really sort of structure your plan from beginning to end. Let's go for the final question. I like to say that it's not always important to move first, but your first move is always important. What are your thoughts on anchoring and the supposed first mover advantage?
There are 2 schools. Obviously, some people say, well, if you open first, then you set that anchor. That's maybe defined for, maybe not all of us know what an anchor is. An anchor is like a ship that you, for example, set your anchor in this particular range, and this is your desired zone of where you negotiate. The obvious advantages of starting first is that you set the scene. But in my opinion, you don't always necessarily have to explicitly anchor. You can make references to past experiences. You can make references to past projects. Even the venue that you choose for your negotiations makes a statement as well, sets certain expectations and so on. If you prepare that behind the scenes, sometimes stage setup, you do not have to take over explicitly as in being the first one to open and so on. You can be the host. Being the host, designing the process, sending the invitation, sending the agenda already is an anchor. You don't have to always explicitly say, okay, this is straight up. But more important for me, not that the question is not important on the aspect of anchoring, is negative anchoring. Negative anchoring, it's something I want to add, is when you use a low point from the past. So for example, and this is, I often very often see this with clients as well, that they say, I'm trying to negotiate, let's say, a better performance rating that I had last year. And they start their meetings with a negative anchor. So let's say the scale is 1 to 100. Let's say that the candidate or the negotiator had a rating of 75 last year and they want 95 this year. Or let's say even lower, let's say 60 and they want 85 or 90. A negative anchor is if they start the negotiation and would say, you know, last year I had 60, but this year I would like to have 90. This is such a big gap and a negative anchor that it will be very difficult, and the other negotiation partner will obviously, their first reaction to it will be, why such a huge leap? You know, better to say instead, I want 90, okay? Without that negative in that sense. Of course, if it's higher, if it's a great result and so on, you can use that as a positive anchor as well.
Fantastic. Well, that was so useful, Kasia. I think we could talk all day about this, and I'm sure there are lots more questions will be coming in, but I'm conscious of time, so I just wanted to sort of post where people can sort of stay in touch with you. You've got your website, negotiationbooster.com, and we've also got your LinkedIn profile, so I'll sort of let people sort of get in touch with you if they have any further questions. But thank you so much for your time. It's been really useful and really illuminating.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions from the audience, and thank you Eloise and Amr for organizing and the invitation. It was a pleasure for me.
No problem. Okay, so thank you to everyone attending and for anyone watching this on demand. I hope you'll tune into our next session, which will be on Tuesday, the 23rd of March, 2 p.m. UK time. And our book of the month will be The Finance Book by Sai Hussain and Stuart Warner. Their masterclass will be on understanding the numbers, even if you're not a finance professional. So don't worry, it's not going to be too complex. They're going to be demystifying the complex for you. So please sign up for our mailing list, and we hope to see you next time. And you might also see a survey pop up, because we want to know if you're enjoying the sessions. So hopefully you can fill that in and let us know how we're doing. So thank you, everyone, and we'll hope to see you again next time.
Thank you.